I wanted to end with some optimistic quotes just to reinforce the importance of China for all the multinational companies that I mentioned. One of the biggest changes between the first book and the second book is the role that China plays for multinational companies and the importance of China in your career. So a lot of CEOs I interviewed mentioned that China now is a must-have posting for anyone who wants to rise to the very top positions of a multinational company. This was not necessarily the case when I did the first round of interviews for the first book. So in other words, if you want to have a global position at L'Oreal, you need to have had the opportunity to be the China CEO first. China is so important that no one can reach the very top levels without having been China's CEO for at least a period of time. That was definitely true in the case of L'Oreal. And after Stefan Rinderknich was interviewed in China CEO 2, he went on to be promoted to a global role. So he's kind of an example of that philosophy. Let's go to the next quote. This one comes from Charles Tsang. He's the China CEO for Korn Ferry, which is a huge recruiting and executive search firm. And so he knows how the markets have changed and how executive search is different in China now from how it was, say, 15 years ago. And he said for a lot of multinational companies, China is becoming a must posting for up-and-coming CEOs. So very similar to what we heard from L'Oreal. Executives who go to China are on an inside track to take bigger positions because of the size of the China market, the complexity, and their recognition, China as a world leader in digital technology, for example. So in all these different ways, China has become a really important posting. So I hope this kind of makes people listening even more committed to the idea of pushing their career in a direction to include China, either doing more business in China or with China, that it can be seen as very, very valuable to a lot of multinational companies. So lastly, I just wanted to give a couple of things to think about, and then we'll get into your questions in terms of what's the future like for those of us who want to advance our career working in China or working with China, especially given the past year and a half since the book came out, and COVID made doing business in or with China different from how it was before. I thought of 4 trends that I think are going to be really important. If you can go to the next slide. The first one I would say is keeping up with China's digital revolution, especially in B2C e-commerce. So things are evolving in China really, really fast. And even if you're outside China, trying to keep up with what's going on in China is really important. So I think this is the first one. The second one is appreciating Chinese style innovation. And if people have questions about that, I can give more detail. But basically, China has become a very innovative market. This was definitely not the case when I wrote the first book. China was known as a factory to the world. It was an excellent place to get things kind of made more cheaply than other places, but it wasn't a place of innovation in its own right. There were also lots of examples of intellectual property rights infringement or copycat back when I did the first book. In the time of the second book, some of those intellectual property rights problems still persist, but most important is that every single CEO I talked to, no matter what industry they were in, they mentioned that their competition in China is among Chinese competitors is at the same level as Western competitors, and that Chinese competitors are very innovative. So this is a big change from years past. And if we talk about the ShareBike case study, I can give you an example of Chinese style innovation that might clarify what that is for people who maybe haven't been in China for a while. The third one is respect China's current sense of national pride. Gabor, as you know, being here in China, this week is the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. there's a huge sense of national pride, very visible, and rightly so. But I think this has become even stronger in the time since COVID has come about. The way China has handled the pandemic has been a source of pride for many people. And it's true, they've done compared to a lot of other countries, they've managed the pandemic in a very effective way. And besides that, since the 2009 financial crisis, there's been more and more a feeling that China's way of developing its economy is different from democratic and capitalistic ways, and can be seen as successful in lots of ways. So there's plenty of reasons for nationalistic pride, and I think that's much stronger than it was when I did the first book. And lastly, I think that we're going to have to live with COVID-related restrictions on travel for the next coming year. And so if you want to do business in or with China, there's plenty of ways to do that digitally. And so I can elaborate on that if that's the case for any of our listeners. But these were the 4 trends that I kind of identified as important. And don't go to the next slide that talks about Microsoft's solution to the bike share. Let's see if anybody asks about that. And yeah, let's open it up for questions.
There was a question already from Fernando that I think is worth looking at.
Okay.
Which is, how would your advice be different from mid-level managers in multinational companies, specifically international foreign managers?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. As a mid-level manager, I think some of the qualities will be the same. You maybe even need to be more humble and adaptable, because you're probably going to be working shoulder to shoulder with Chinese nationals, and so humility. The basic idea is to feel free to express your expertise where you are an expert, but also be humble and acknowledge the areas where you're not an expert. So you may be an excellent engineer or communications director in your home country, but to try to quickly be aware of where that doesn't apply to China, and just be very humble about it. That's the best way to win collaborative relationships, which you need in China. And so, not underselling your expertise in the areas where you have expertise, but being very humble and adaptable and flexible in terms of learning about China. I think language skills, the more junior you are, I would say the more important language skills can be in terms of quickly understanding and learning about China. There's sort of more acceptance if you're a senior leader that you may not have Chinese language skills, but the younger and more junior you are, the more pressure there would be to have those language skills. And frankly, the faster you'll be able to make friends, integrate, develop relationships that can be so helpful. Yeah.
Right.
Tell
us when we want to go back to that slide with the Microsoft case study. I think some of us are dying to know what's the end of the story. Okay. Is now a good time, or do you think we should take a couple of questions?
Let's do it.